Thank you very much, Marcy. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing your story about your mom too. And thank you for sharing that link with me. I did go back and listen to it. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, make sure I share sound so I don't forget that. So we're going to be going over the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. This is the generic program that we do. And keep in mind that this program is built to be an hour long. But since I'm kind of, I got to shorten it into about 20, 30 minutes because I know like you guys want some opportunities for Q&A afterwards. So let's just get right into the program. Okay, so let's first go over some of the learning objectives for today's program. We're going to describe some of the typical age-related changes when it comes to memory, thinking, or behavior. And we'll also compare it with the common warning signs of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. We'll discuss the tips for approaching somebody about memory concerns. We'll explain why it's important to detect these things as early as possible, and also the benefits that come with obtaining a diagnosis. Then we'll identify some of the possible tests and assessments that go along with the diagnostic process, and then we'll name some resources that are available through us. You see me skipping a lot, because like I said, it's supposed to be an hour long. But I'm still going to be going over the relevant material. So let's first go into what dementia is specifically, because you hear a lot about these two terms, dementia and Alzheimer's disease, being tossed around, but they are different from each other.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual. But there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alice Alzheimer's described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem solving, thinking, and even feelings. There are about 100 billion nerve cells or neurons throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss, or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
All right, now let's go into detail about why it's important to know these signs that I'm about to go into.
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things. But when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with.
Okay, now let's get into each of the specific warning signs. So the first one is probably the one that you often hear the most often. It's memory loss that disrupts daily life. And I want to really take a moment to emphasize that memory loss is only really problematic or associated with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia if it disrupts somebody's ability to remain independent. It involves things like forgetting important dates, asking the same questions over and over again, and relying a lot on memory aids or their caregiver to perform common tasks. Whereas with typical age-related change, it's sometimes forgetting those appointments that you've scheduled long before, but you always tend to remember them later. Number two is challenges in planning or problem solving. This usually includes trying to keep up with things that have a lot of steps, a lot of like complex tasks to perform, like keeping track of monthly bills or following a recipe. And people with Alzheimer's disease have difficulty concentrating, and they tend to take a little bit longer to complete tasks. Whereas typical age-related change is usually like making occasional errors. And we're all guilty of this. It's just a part of being human when we make occasional errors when it comes to managing finances. Number three is difficulty completing familiar tasks. Driving to a familiar location, like the grocery store or the church, or your relative's house. If you tend to get lost a lot, that might be cause for concern. It also includes maybe difficulty organizing your grocery list, or if there's a game that you used to play all the time and you're starting to have difficulty remembering the rules. With typical age-related change, it's usually associated with occasionally needing help to like do things that you don't really do that frequently, but you still like do from time to time, like adjusting settings on a microwave, like adjusting like the time when daylight savings time comes, or recording a television show. Number four is confusion with time or place, and that involves trouble understanding something that really isn't happening in their immediate reality. A dead giveaway of this for somebody that has Alzheimer's disease is if they are dressing inappropriately for the correct season. If they're warm and comfy in their house, but it's winter and it's sleeting outside and they want to go run errands in a tank top and shorts, then there might be something more going on. Whereas with typical age-related change, we're all guilty of getting confused about what day of the week it is, but like I said before, we tend to figure it out later. Number five is trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. With typical age-related change, we tend to experience changes in like our prescription or cataracts tend to develop. The type of vision changes I'm talking about with dementia is more trying to judge distance between two objects or determining color or contrast, and this can lead to problems with driving. Number six is new problems with words in speaking or writing. You may notice that your loved one or yourself, you may be stopping in the middle of the conversation and you don't know how to continue. You may struggle with vocabulary. You may come up with new vocabulary words like thingamajig or whatchamacallit. Whereas typical age-related change is sometimes you have trouble finding the right word, but not all the time. Number seven is one that I hear very frequently in people who don't have Alzheimer's disease or dementia, but they may think they do, which is misplacing things and losing their ability to retrace steps. I hear all the time that somebody may think that they have Alzheimer's disease because they lose their keys every day, where that's not exactly the case. It's people with Alzheimer's disease lack their executive functioning capability. And that allows them to retrace their steps and think about what they were doing prior to when they misplaced their item. And because they're unable to do this, they may accuse others of stealing. And that may occur frequently over time as the disease progresses. Like I said, with typical age-related changes, if you misplace something, but you're able to find it later by retracing your steps, then that's not much cause for concern. Number eight is decreased or poor judgment. And this usually has to deal with either managing finances, grooming themselves, or keeping their house clean. Hoarding is a common symptom of Alzheimer's disease. Whereas with typical age-related change, like I said before, we're all human. We all make mistakes once in a while. like neglecting to change an oil in the car. That's typical age-related change. Number 9 is withdrawal from work or social activities. If your loved one is withdrawing from hobbies or things that they used to do all the time, or if there were social events that they used to love going to, but they're met with a newfound challenge and they are having trouble keeping up with conversations and social events, that might be something to look into. But it's not something to look into if you sometimes feel uninterested in going to that family pool party. Changes in mood and personality is number 10 on the list, and that involves being very confused, suspicious, or anxious, either in your own home, in your comfort area, or outside your comfort zone. If your loved one seemingly becomes very anxious or has drastic mood changes, seemingly out of nowhere, that there might be something else going on. Whereas with typical age-related change, it's more associated with developing a very specific way of doing things. And then when our routine is disrupted and we get frustrated about that, that's just part of being human. Let's go over the importance of why it's important to detect these things early as possible.
You know, it's a very interesting phenomenon that people who have memory problems are often less aware of it than family members or their friends who know them well. One of the reasons for that is our ability to monitor ourselves, which is an important part of brain function, decreases when we start having memory problems. Not in everybody, but commonly, and more than half the people with memory problems. And so the person is just not keeping track of the trouble they're having day to day. But the family members are, paying attention. If they're paying attention, they see, boy, this is starting to happen a lot. And the person's not aware of it. So the family's more aware, and they may talk to their loved one about it. And they say, I've noticed you've been repeating yourself. And they say, I'm not repeating myself. And that could either be due to the fact that they're not aware of it, or they may not want to acknowledge it.
Let's go over what you should do if you do notice changes in somebody. The Alzheimer's Association developed a 10-step approach if your loved one does have memory issues, or you may suspect that they have memory issues. But number 1 is try to come up with or try to write down some of the different changes that you may see in memory, thinking, or behavior. It's important to write these things down because you may need it to use it as leverage in a conversation down the road. I shouldn't say leverage, that's kind of a negative word, or replace it with like something to like validate your concerns. Number 2 is what else is going on. Even if you don't think that symptoms that are manifesting may be associated with dementia, write it down anyway, because when you have this discussion with their doctor, they may need to rule out anything else that may be going on. Number 3 is learning about the signs and the benefits of an early diagnosis. Has anyone else noticed changes? It's important to talk with any other close family members or friends, neighbors that may visit your loved one often to try to validate what you've been seeing and see if they notice the same things. Hey, have a conversation. Determine who should have that conversation. And this is an important piece because there may be somebody that your loved one is most comfortable speaking with, especially if they're talking about themselves, talking about something that is problematic with them, something that's going on. They may notice these changes, but don't feel comfortable just talking about it with anybody. Determine what the best time to have this conversation is, or the best place. And that's because people with Alzheimer's disease or related dementia tend to be more cognitively aware during a particular time of day. And that time of day can be different for anybody. From talking with families in the past, I've noticed that it's typically in the morning, and then they start to feel a little bit more confused in the afternoon. So if that's the case, approach them in the morning. And if they tend to be more comfortable in their own home, have the conversation in their home. Or you may need to take them out to their favorite restaurant to spark up the conversation. What will you or the person having the conversation say? This is another important piece, is to prepare. Just like if you're preparing for a job interview, you want to write down all the things that they may ask you, or write down the things that you may have to say, and use that tip I said, number one, where you should write down all your concerns, because you may need to use it if they grill you for providing examples, or you may need to speak with other family members who also have other examples that you may have not seen. Offer to go to the doctor with the person. This may be a significant barrier that you may not that immediately see. Something as simple as scheduling the appointment can go a long way for your loved one. They may not feel comfortable going alone, so definitely offer. If you need to, have multiple conversations. Speaking with families in the past, I've noticed that a lot of people don't even try to have the conversation. They automatically assume the worst, or they may have one conversation that didn't go well. But it's very important to have multiple conversations and try different approach each time. Reach out to support. Turn to us at the Alzheimer's Association. I cover Albany County specifically, but I do have colleagues who are other program managers at my chapter who cover 17 counties. We cover 17 counties altogether, and we can provide you with not only Alzheimer's Association disease information, but also like support and resources in each of those counties. Lastly, see a doctor. Now you're probably wondering, okay, which doctor do I see to get a diagnosis? Well, typically it's the primary care physician is usually the gatekeeper for this type of process to start. And they don't really have the capacity to diagnose you with something very specifically. There are over 100 different types of dementia. So they may just diagnose you with, if they do diagnose you with dementia, it'll be just a general dementia diagnosis, where they may refer you to a specialist. More often than not, it's going to be a neurologist, where they are equipped with the medical technology to get that more accurate diagnosis.
There are a number of benefits in early detection of Alzheimer's. For one thing, a person is able to have a voice in what happens next. They can make plans. They can live life more on their own terms. They can also make plans for the future, financial plans, care plans. They can let people know what they want, which can be a real gift later on. It also allows time for families to make plans and to make decisions about who can do what and figure out care and those kinds of issues. Also, the treatments that are available for Alzheimer's don't cure Alzheimer's. They don't slow down the disease, but they do help with symptoms. And it seems as though they tend to work better the earlier a person is able to use those. So that can help too. Some people are interested in clinical trials. Clinical trials allow people to have access to treatments that aren't available yet. And for some people, that can be a really important thing to pursue.
Okay, so let's go over seeking a diagnosis real quick. All right, so I'm going to engage you guys real quick. So there is currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Is this statement true or false? If you're comfortable, take yourself off mute and have at it.
False.
I heard false.
False.
False. Okay, let's see. You guys are correct. There are a number of assessments and tests that make it possible for healthcare professionals to diagnose Alzheimer's disease with a high degree of certainty. It's not 100%, but it's, in the 90s, probably around 95% certainty. Here's a list of the possible assessments that you may expect when seeking a diagnosis. They'll first look at your medical history. They may give you a physical. They may screen for depression. This is because depression often has similar symptoms to Alzheimer's disease. They may interview your caregiver, somebody who lives with you. Some tests may include laboratory tests, mental cognitive status test, or some type of brain imaging, like a CT scan, an MRI, or a PET scan. Okay, so what's next if the diagnosis is Alzheimer's? There's a lot to skip at the end. Okay, so let's go over briefly about, and I can go over this more in detail later on when, like I saw on the agenda. But here's some of our general resources. If you or your loved one that you're concerned about having Alzheimer's disease, or you're an active caregiver, we do have a helpline. It's right here, this 800 number. And when you call that number, you'll meet with a contact center staff member of ours somewhere in the country. And they are available 24/7 to provide any disease information, any disease-related resources around you, or just provide emotional support. They're there when you need them and if you just want to talk. And that 24/7 is true. It can be 11 o'clock at night on Thanksgiving, and there'll be somebody available. We have an extensive website at alz.org that also provides a lot of readable material on the disease. And we have if you go to our website /CRF, that stands for Community Resource Finder, and you'll be able to find our hour-long programs like this one. And we have many different other programs and caregiver support groups. We have early stage engagement opportunities. It's really worth looking into if you want to get a little bit more involved with us. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these, but some things I do want to point out, like Marcy said in her personal story on Sunday, she was involved in the clinical trial, but we do have a service called Trial Match. And this is an easy to use matching service. It's no commitment. You sign up and just to see what's out there. There is some stuff going on in Albany, I believe at Albany Med, and it would just show a huge list of the different trials that you can click on and then sign up through their own means. We also have the Walk to End Alzheimer's that you've probably heard of, which is our largest fundraising opportunity. If we are a charity, we're a very large charity that's nationwide, and if fundraising is your thing, we'd love to have you help us out. All right, that concludes the 10 warning signs. Like I said, I know it's supposed to be an hour long, and I wish I could have talked for an hour, but yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to ask.